Hi, I'm Emily Chiu. I'm a creative producer at Duolingo, and later I will be joined by Kevin Lenzo, research scientist on the Speech Lab. Last year at Duocon, we introduced you to our characters and their names, and this year Kevin and I would like to introduce you to their voices. So you're probably familiar with Siri or Alexa's voices, these super iconic, recognizable, computer-generated voices that you pretty much hear everywhere now. These are produced by having a real person, usually an actor, read thousands and thousands of lines, and the result is a computer-generated voice that can take any text you give it and read it in that person's voice. So in a nutshell, this is what text-to-speech, or TTS, is. Duolingo also uses TTS. We don't record every single line that we have in the app. For a long time in our app, we use generic or stock TTS voices that you could purchase just like stock photography, for example. So here's an example of how our character Junior, who's an 8-year-old boy, sounded like in the Spanish to English course.
Drugstores sell both shampoo and conditioner.
So as you can tell, that doesn't really sound like an 8-year-old boy. So what we're working on now is giving our characters their own distinct voices that reflect their individual personalities. So I'll give you an example of what Junior sounds like now.
Drugstores sell both shampoo and conditioner.
So Junior is just one of our 10 Duolingo characters. We've been developing these characters for a year and a half, and we've always had Duo, but now we have these 9 other human characters that accompany you in the app from stories to lessons. 2 of my favorite characters are Lily, the thoroughly unimpressed, surly-looking teenage girl in the center with the purple hair, and also Oscar, who is the mustachioed fancy pants art teacher in the pink shirt. I won't go through all the characters now, but they all have their own distinct personalities and backstories that we've been developing. One thing we considered a lot when we were developing these characters is how to make them really, really iconic. So just super memorable, distinctive, with really strong brand recognition, but also really relatable and engaging and just fun. So to this aim, we consulted some experts who have created some really iconic characters. So we talked to the studios behind Sesame Street and Adventure Time. One of the things we learned is that characters are really iconic because of how they look, how they move, and how they sound. So our team had already done an incredible job with look and move portions of it. You know, the characters were already in the app, they were cheering you on, celebrating your wins. So the last piece of the puzzle was really just how they sound. And the first step to figuring that out was casting. So we decided to borrow some best practices from animation in Hollywood. We hired a casting director. She worked on Robot Chicken and Call of Duty, and we started reviewing auditions from established voiceover actors. So what were we looking for in these auditions? The first thing was personality. We really wanted lots and lots of personality. Because in our app, most of the content is just single sentences in the lessons, we really needed these actors to convey these characters' personalities really clearly in just a single sentence. The second thing we looked for was humor and entertainment. So we really just wanted funny, engaging voices that could really make our users laugh and smile. So the last thing we were looking for is distinctiveness. So clearly we want to be able to distinguish the characters from one another, but also one thing that's really important when you're learning a new language is to hear all different kinds of voices. So adults of different ages and genders, as well as children who are often really the hardest to understand, especially in a language that's not your native tongue. So to do this, we spent many, many months reviewing hundreds and hundreds of auditions, really debating the merits of each. Sometimes it even got a little bit contentious because we were each fighting for like the version of Oscar that we really wanted. But after about a year, we had cast 9 characters in English, and we had even finished recording all of the necessary lines to record the TTS. So this was a huge milestone for us. But what about the other 39 languages that we teach? So we decided to move forward in 4 of our most popular languages, Spanish, French, German, and Japanese. But very quickly, we ran into this huge logistical problem, which is how do you cast in a language that's not your native tongue? So most of our team is native English speakers. We're learners of these languages, but we're not proficient necessarily. We're not advanced, we're not fluent, we're not native, definitely. So we're missing some nuance of the performances. So we wondered, how do you capture the nuance of little boy Junior on the left, his precociousness in German, or emo teen Lily in the center, her sarcasm in Japanese? We decided to take a really analytical approach to this issue. So we assembled a team of native speakers, some creatives and some language experts, and we had them evaluate specific qualities in the auditions. So for a Lily audition, for example, we would ask them, on a scale of 1 to 5, how disdainful does this actor sound? Or for Oscar, the fancy pants art teacher, right, we would ask them, how pretentious does this character sound on a scale of 1 to 5? And we ended up with actors in all the other languages that sounded pretty similar in some cases to the English actor. And in some cases, they were kind of like the French version of that character. So right now, I'm going to play for you the English version of Oscar.
My father and my mother like my jacket.
And also the French version of Oscar.
Mon père et ma mère aiment mon blouson.
So we are almost finished recording these, and we're actually building the voices now. So I'm going to pass this off to Kevin to talk about building the voices.
Thanks, Emily. All right, let's talk about building synthetic voices. We use machine learning to make these voices talk. And that means that we're analyzing everything that goes into it, all of the text, and we're predicting how a voice should say everything, the phrasing, the timing, the intonation, everything. Once we do build it out of these amazing materials that Emily just talked about, with characters that bring everything to life, then we make sure it's up to our quality standards. We thoroughly evaluate everything. If there's something that doesn't work just right, we try to improve the algorithms or correct, remove, and edit the data that goes into it to make it just right. One example might be if a question doesn't rise the way it should at the end of a sentence. The building blocks that go into this are those 6,000 aforementioned sentences. These are carefully designed and completely balanced for combinations of speech sounds in different contexts with phrasings and different sentence types. For instance, the sounds in speech sound different in different contexts, like the initial L in the word lateral sounds different from the final L. And the same is true for the initial and final R in the word reader. The P in the word peak is pronounced differently from the P in speak. And we want to get all of these things correct because we want to teach people as if they're learning from a native speaker. To get all the context that we'd need about 100 times the amount of data that we collect for this 6,000 sentences. And from these 6,000 sentences, we're going to make a lot of content in all of these voices. Once we build the voices, we still have to say everything correctly. And language can be ambiguous. For instance, the English word R-E-A-D could be pronounced read or read, depending on whether it's the present or the past tense. Or the phrasing may be wrong. For instance, we might hear, she never saw a dog and didn't smile, which means something very different from, she never saw a dog and didn't smile. And another simple example would be if I were to say your name, hello, Kevin, as opposed to, hello, Kevin. Every one of these examples is corrected by a linguist. So when we see something or hear something that's wrong in the course content, we can fix it. Now, why would we build these voices? The key is really flexible content. We can bring new content to life, we can fix things, we can add new content, and we can respond to what a learner is going through. We can make new lessons depending on what they're doing at the time. And it adds depth and brings that content to life, as we've seen before. In short, they sound great, they help us be nimble, and they open up new learning experiences. Well, that's enough of us talking. Now let's hear from our characters, who can speak for themselves.
We each have our own personalities,
And we have backstories and relationships.
which help to add depth to our characters.
It makes language learning more fun.
And provides lots of variety for learners to hear.
Not just one or two, but many different people's voices.
Putting everyone together brings language learning alive.
Get to know our stories.
As you learn to read, write, listen, and speak with Duolingo.
Gracias.
Merci.
Hasta la vista.
Now that our characters have said thank you for themselves, we would also like to thank you and everyone who helps bring these characters to life.
Thank you.